When you talk about total cost of ownership, that's seemingly a financial discussion, but how does that fit into this sort of power consumption model?
Well, so I'm based out of Seattle. We've done a lot of work with Microsoft, and I remember they would never really quote numbers, but they said the power used by a server surpasses the cost of a server in 3 months. So if something goes out, we throw it away. Like there is this complete understanding at their level, when you think of that macro level, of just how key it is for a component. We look at it a little bit differently because we're usually a cost center and based in security. So to us, it's how can you apply it with the lowest cost? And to us, that's usually hardware. Now, it's saying that's always the right solution, but if we can get hardware-based 10, 20, 30x performance for a specific piece of hardware, that's an easy math to do.
And if you think back to the telco days, I mean, early telco versus, say, telco in the 50s and 60s, what we saw there was sort of that same model. Of course, they didn't have software in the early days, but they really, through the use of early ASICs and other things like that, really got the capacity levels up significantly. Where do we sort of sit at this point? Because I mean, obviously there's talk about FPGA, ASICs, DSPs. When you're talking about hardware, is it something that the hardware itself can cut the power consumption in half, or is it the optimization of that hardware with software?
There's a combination of both, but ultimately we see 70-80% reduction in power for the same task to be performed in general CPU. So if you have somebody who just says, I'm experimenting or I want to try, they're going to punt it to a general processor. Right. Once they figure it out, and the telcos are still relevant, they're less and less every day, but they've pushed that and they understand the value of scale and then cost at scale. They really drive it down to, this is X dollars per subscriber per this license and per the operating cost. So they're really good about it. Unfortunately, they're not really good about the other side of their business and how to monetize it and how to gain it. So they're sort of failing in the global market, but they are good about solving that problem.
Interesting. What about the other two, TCO and sort of this, how it relates to power consumption?
Well, I would say sustainability is all about efficiencies and gaining efficiencies, and the more you can do those sorts of things, whether it's through hardware, repurposing. A lot of organizations are now doing that, and that is a part of the component as well as software solutions. So I think it's part of the important part of sustainability is integrating it into your business decision making from the get-go. You can't do it at the back end and say, oh, this whole process, and by the way, how did we do with sustainability? It has to be part of those initial conversations in any decision making strategy sessions that you have. And that's a mindset change that I think will come more and more as regulations come into play. But that's what I think it has to take.
And is part of the reason to do that so that it sticks as opposed to just being a fad to be sustainable?
That's right. This is not a fad anymore. Okay. And one of the big things that's coming is the SEC is about to change some filing regulations that will require listed companies to have a sustainability measurement and reporting along with their financial reporting. And that's going to push that sustainability discussion down the chain because every company is a scope 3 component to somebody else. So it's going to start growing more and more, and so it's not a fad.
Okay, good.
Yeah, sure, and I think it's interesting because at the end of the day, creating efficient software is kind of been ignored, especially workloads that run in the cloud. And transparently, my experience has been, as a kernel engineer, high performance kernel engineer, real-time operating system kernel engineer, and it's been a lost art. But I'd say that art is lost no longer. So I did give a presentation yesterday of the work we've been doing with Intel, based upon the Varnish Foundation. So Varnish, even going back 10 years, has been highly performant. All the tricks of the trade, the best tricks of the trade, right, to actually build software. Now I can finally have figures because it's more important, right? So, a case in point, I do think we have about the best in the industry right now performance at about 386 megabits per watt, right? But give us about a quarter with the work we've done with Intel in their labs with their next generation processors, we're really aiming for a gigabit per watt.
That's amazing.
So literally, if you look at that from the next generation perspective, to run the most challenging workloads, the power demand is going to go down by 2/3.
And that's a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
You're,
Well, it's great for
Yeah.
companies because, for a case in point, it's not just green. It's not just building green fields. No pun intended.
Right,
we are
right.
talking green,
Right.
but it goes back to getting a generation or 2 generations of reuse of existing hardware.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.